Without further ado, let's welcome Marc Lacuesta.
Whoa, this thing is awesome. All right, hey, how many of you were here at the last time that I came to Capitol? It was maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Anyone? Nobody? All right, well, I was going to say, anyway, about 2 or 3 years ago, I brought this song that I had just written, and we broke it down from a production standpoint. And, started from when we first wrote it, how we added things, how we kind of turned it into a full production. And since then, that song got me a publishing deal with HD Music Now out in California, and it's in 2 movies this year. So if you see the trailer for Old Fashioned or for Baby Steps, 2 wildly different movies, and you'll know what I mean if you Google them, then you'll hear that song. So anyone who was around here for those presentations, you'll recognize that song. Anyway, I just want to thank Capitol and especially Chad for letting me talk to you guys. I've got so much to tell you. Mainly, I wanted to have this talk be about, since most of you are students or starting out in music, not all of you, but most of you, I had talked to a bunch of my friends, producers, engineers, songwriters, programmers, and I said, if you had music school to do again, if you were in music school right now, knowing what you know about the music industry, what would you do differently? And a lot of the things that they came up with and what I came up with are relevant not only to you if you're a student, but also things that you can start doing right now if you're a music professional that I think will make your lives a lot easier. Mainly, I'm going to separate it into 2 sections. One, the beginning part is some practical things you can do from a technical standpoint or from increasing your knowledge as far as a music professional. And the second part is all about being a people person and the different ways that can really help you throughout recording. On the second point, being a people person, I should mention that I wore this shirt not because I thought it was cool, and it's huge for me, but when you flip this switch, it works like a little sound meter, and I thought, I'm going to annoy them the entire speech. I'm just going to talk and they're going to be staring at it. But the story behind this shirt is given to me by a guy in Los Angeles who introduced me to another guy, who introduced me to another guy, who introduced me to a fellow named Amrit Desai who started all the Kripalu yoga things. And that led to about 3 records. So this shirt actually goes along with my being a people person thing and how important it is to get gigs and how to continue to grow your clientele. And I am going to turn this off. And I'm going to change into one of those great Capital University radio t-shirts afterwards because this thing is hot. There's like electronics and stuff in it. Anyhow, first, the more technical things, the more practical things. And these are things that I gleaned from my friends. If you've heard of our podcast, we do this podcast called Mixed Notes from Hell, which is a bunch of people that I went to school with at Berklee College of Music who are all doing big things out in LA and New York and Chicago and South Carolina. And so, and in fact, if you ever want to know my story or any of my credits, you can check out my website or Google me, or the very last version of Mixed Notes from Hell. That podcast is all Mark-centric, so as much as anyone would ever need to know about me. Anyhow, what should you do, what would I do differently if I were in music school knowing what I know now? Some of these I have done, and some of these I have not done. This is one that I did do, but one that my friends mentioned to me. They said, make sure that you use your time in school to master the basics and do them quickly. And use your school lab time to figure out the basics. And then once you have those basics covered, then start experimenting. And experiment as much as you can, because when you're in a studio situation, that's not the time to experiment. Someone is paying you. Someone is usually standing over your shoulder saying, gotta go, gotta go, gotta go. You should know if you need to move fast where you can put a 57 on a cabinet to make it sound good, where you need to move it if it's too bright or too dull, how it sounds when you lift it off the ground, what pickups work on what guitars, what pedal chains you should use. This is all stuff that you can learn in school right now. Or if you're out of school, I mean, you have pedals, you have a guitar, you should always be experimenting, because in the grand scheme of things, time is money. And although you may be into the art and the artist is into the art, the person who's usually paying for it is the one standing behind you tapping their foot saying, let's go, let's go, let's go. You have to find some area in between artistry and being good with your money, being good with your time. So make sure that you know just basic ways in order to get sounds quickly. And I wrote down some things that you could experiment with. Like, you could go to a lab right after this talk and start practicing these things. Like I said, how much bigger a cabinet sounds when you lift it off the ground. Why do horns sound weird when I'm going in and tuning them? Equal temperament. How to get a great workable vocal tone. And that actually applies to me a lot, because I'm known for doing vocals. If you're working really, really quick, you may not get the best vocal tone, but if you get a thick vocal tone, you can do a lot with it. It's much easier to chop EQ out of a thick vocal than it is to try and add heaviness and add thickness to a vocal. So always cut thick if you're in a hurry. You should know your console signal flow. You should know what certain mics sound like, and I know that they teach that very well here. I saw your mic cabinets. I saw an AEA ribbon in there, which is awesome. I can't believe you guys get to use that. You should know what all of these mics do, and if someone says, we need this guitar to sound a certain way, you should right away, like in 2 seconds, say, I know which mic. Grab it, set it up, know where to put it, and go. Quickness, quickness, quickness. Everything in the professional studio scene is quickness, unless, of course, you're working in a cheaper room or you have someone with deep pockets. So anyway, master the basics quickly, and then experiment as much as you can after you do that. Another practical thing, and this is something that I wish I did in school. Spend money on a great set of headphones and a great set of speakers, and learn them well, and also make sure that they cater to your weaknesses. Now, what I mean when I say that is that if you get certain speakers, like for example, I love Mackeys. I love those big Mackeys. You know why I love them? Because everything sounds great on them. You know, everything sounds terrific. When you're tracking, in fact, or if you are in a studio and the bigs are up, you want to put those bigs on because they sound big and full and everything sounds terrific. But when they take those tracks home and they put it on their car stereo, or they put it on in their house, they're upset because it doesn't sound as big or as awesome as it did in the studio. When I'm tracking or when I'm listening to things, I want to use speakers and headphones that cater to my weaknesses. And when I say that, I mean my weaknesses are, I tend to put too much, I'd say 2 to 5K in my stuff. That's a problem that I've always had. When I listen to stuff that I mix somewhere else, it always sounds bright. So at home, or in my studio at home, or my headphones, I've got a pair of old HDR 600s, Sony HDR 600s. I've got a pair of Blue Sky monitors. Why did I pick those? Because Blue Skies are known for being hyped up top, actually in the 2 to 5K range. And so if they sound too sizzly for me, I'll dial them down to where they sound right to me. And then if someone comes in front of my Blue Skies and they're like, man, that sure is bright, and it sounds terrific to me, I know that when they put those on their speakers at home, it's going to sound correct. You should know what speakers work for you. If you have, and this can be done, you can go into any store and you can just stand in front of those speakers or try on headphones. Grados are terrific for high-end. The Sonys that I mentioned, or actually the Sennheisers, there's a pair of Sennheisers you can get for $99. They have this really weird bump around 1K. where it like hypes and then it goes down. You'll see it if you look at the frequency response. But anyway, try them on, listen to them, know your weaknesses. If you don't know your weaknesses, ask your friends. Say like, hey, here's a mix that I did, what do you think? And if they're consistently saying, man, your mid-range sounds a little thin. So you know that you are mixing it a little thin, so you should get speakers, or you should EQ your room so your mid-range is a little thin. You know what I mean? Because that's your normal. And then when you mix, you're going to automatically compensate for what sounds good, even all the way through. Now I don't know if that's like the absolute perfect way to do it. You can train your ears to know what feels good for everyone all the way across. But I know that for me, that helped me a ton. And eventually, the differences got smaller and smaller and smaller as I worked on more records. So it's just a quick thing that you can do to really improve your mixes. Another practical thing, I kept a journal of good ideas when I was going to school. So keep a journal of good ideas. How many of you guys have read about Brian Eno's deck of cards, the oblique strategies? Yeah. Is only one? You guys got to Google that. You guys got to check that out. Am I right?
Yeah, there's a site, because I saw that the other day, because there's like a new Ableton book that kind of gives like strategies.
Oh, yeah.
And I reference that. So there's like a page with a refresh button.
Right.
And it just starts going into...
It goes through all the cards. Well, I'll tell you basically what it is. Brian Eno, you all know who Brian Eno is, but he had a deck of cards that he used when he produced things in order to keep him from going stale with his productions. Because when you work on music for a long time, you tend to use the same tricks. You tend to use the things that work for you all the time. And especially if you're in a professional studio environment and you have to go quick, quick, quick because that guy's behind you like rubbing his fingers together telling you how much money he's spending every second. Especially if you have string players. Oh. But anyway, what the cards say, they have these very different strategies on them, and he'd pick one out and apply it to the mix. And they might say things like, find the most important part of the song and take it out. The other one might say, take the quietest thing in your mix and make it the focus. Make the loudest thing in your mix a background part. Another thing might be like, mess around with delays, or it's all just things to kind of stretch your brain and to make your productions a little bit different from what you normally do. So check those out for sure, Brian Eno's oblique strategies. What I did in order to get my journal of good ideas together was when I was in music school, I made it a point to listen to a different CD every single day of music that I didn't normally listen to. And I would write down the things that I liked about it, and I would write down what I thought made me like it. And you don't have to do that in a music school library. I mean, these days I do it with YouTube. I just pick something that, I'll find something that is in the top of the charts in world music, and I'll listen to it on YouTube. And although the fidelity is not great, I mean, you can still pick out production ideas from it. It's all about teaching yourself, continuing to learn. So, and that goes on to my next point, and this is actually my last point as far as the more practical stuff goes. Know your influences. Know the influences of the music that is around you, the music that's popular. I wrote down a couple things. Like if you're into dubstep, I know a lot of people are into electronic music or into programming, then you should know who the Belleville Three are. You should know who like Kevin Saunderson is. You should know who Derek May is, Juan Atkins. You should know anything out of anything that Mute Records ever put out, or Transmat. You should know that if you are an electronica fan. You should know those things. Prodigy, Front 242. You can start getting into stuff that Wax Trax did. If you know the history, then you'll realize that a lot of the music that you're hearing today is a basic rip-off of what was done 20 years ago with better instruments. And not all of it. there are some people who are pushing the scenes, and that's not just for electronica either. I mean, let's go in other things. If you're a big fan of let's see, what do I have written now? Like Vampire Weekend or Kaiser Chiefs, then you should know Blur. And if you know Blur, then you should know The Jam. Do you guys know any of these bands? Have you heard of any of these guys? Paul Weller? You know, Paul Weller influenced Oasis, and how many people did Oasis influence? You know, I can think of a ton just off the top of my head. So, if you're not sure where to start when you start looking up these bands and learning people's histories, start with the record credits. See who they thank. Or go to their Wikipedia page and see like who they've mentioned in articles, who were their influences. If you're a big fan of vocal harmonies, like, who is that woman that had all those crazy vocal harmonies? Imogen Heap, right? Frou Frou? If you're a big fan of her, then you should know the Roches from 1970. Do any of you guys know the Roches? Oh man, you guys gotta check them out. If you know the Roches, you ought to check out the Free Design. Have you heard of them? They have this crazy song called Kites Are Fun. Trust me, look that up. You're not gonna be disappointed. If you get to the Free Design, then you can get all the way to the Beach Boys. And if you really like take the Beach Boys apart, you can go all the way back in time to the Four Freshmen. These are things that you should know as a musician because history repeats itself. Every time they repeat themselves, they tend to do it a little better than the last generation, a little bit more polished. Like when I said that everything is a ripoff from times before, ripoff is a little harsh. I would say it is a reimagining that is usually a lot more polished, a lot more technical, in a lot of ways, a lot better. I don't know if I kind of liken it to when you go to the Olympics and you see like, oh man, when Bannister ran the 4-minute mile, wasn't that something? You know? And then like, you know, back in the 60s that was something, but in the 80s that wasn't really something, and even now, like, it's not that big a deal. So the youth movement in music is constantly trying to polish and constantly trying to make better. There's a fight against that too, but that's a whole different talk. So that's the practical stuff. The second part of this talk, and I should take a look. Oh my goodness, where does the time go? Is about being a people person, and this is the part that is most important to you who are in music school. The people that you interact with now are people that you're going to be working with for the rest of your lives if you stay in music. And not just engineers. Could be programmers, could be sound designers, could be A&R people, could be business people. It could be managers, could be club owners. Everyone in here loves music. And so everyone is going to find a way to stay connected to music. You need to make your friends and stay connected with them. So these are some things that my friends and I wrote down. Oh, by the way, first and foremost of being a people person is just be nice. No egos. You really don't need to have an ego ever, but people get away with it once they've won a couple Grammys. I could tell you stories, but I'm aware that this is being streamed. And anyway, the main point of that statement is you can mess up. You can mess up if you're an engineer. You can mess up if you're an assistant. You can mess up if you're an intern, and rarely will you get fired for that if people think you're a good person. If people enjoy being around you, if people think you're fun and interesting, if people think you're a drag, and if people think that, man, it feels like I'm wrapped in a wet blanket every time that guy walks into the room, the first thing you do wrong, you're out the door. They don't want that kind of vibe. It's like, if any of you guys have seen The Last Days of Disco, it's like when people find out there's ad executives in the disco, and we don't want that kind of element in here. The studio is such a stressful environment to begin with, that you don't want someone in there that's bringing you down. You don't want someone in there that's making you feel dumb or bad. In fact, everything is about being relaxed and about doing your job. And you'll see that actually a lot when we do this master class on vocal production. We only have 50 minutes to get a vocal, so it's going to be interesting to get a quick vocal and stay relaxed, but I'll do my best. About being a people person, I wrote down a couple points. The first point is find, identify, and become friends with people who are better than you and who work harder than you. So in music school, I don't think it's very hard to find someone who's better than you. I went to Berkeley, and immediately when I stepped on campus, I thought, well, I would hear people sing or perform, and I'd be like, well, that guy's better than me, that guy's better than me. Everyone kind of puts themselves up against the people in their class, right? Which is fine. You can't help what talent level people come into school with. What you can help is how hard you work. And that's what I did when I went to Berkeley. I thought, I know I'm not as talented as these people, but one thing I can control is that no one's going to outwork me. And so I did, and at the same time, I tried to get close to those people who I knew were super talented because I knew that they could teach me something. And it worked. It totally worked. And I'll tell you, too, that when you're hanging out with people who are heads and tails better musicians than you, it forces you to be a better musician just really out of embarrassment. You're sitting around in a circle and everyone's got a guitar or piano and everyone's jamming. They're like, hey man, let's chord substitute every 4, or let's use secondary dominance on the bridge, man. And you're like, oh man, okay. And then you kind of fake playing it the first time around to see what they're doing, and the second time you kind of get closer. And then when you go home from that, you study, and you're like, I don't want to feel that dumb again. You study what all those things are that these amazing musicians have taught you and talked to you about. And then the next time it comes around, you know it, and then a new class of freshmen comes in, and they're the dumb guy. Am I right? So anyway, being around musicians is always going to help you, but being around musicians who are way better than you is going to stretch you. So, and being around people who are hard workers and who work hard is going to keep you on task. If you're around someone who's like, hey man, I got to study tonight, let's study, and it's like, oh, there's this awesome game on, and there's an awesome game on every night, you're probably not going to get a lot of work done around them. So, sorry to anyone in here who's that guy. Sorry. No, nothing personal, but okay. I would also say, my second point is work with people who are different from your field of study. I know a lot of friends that I made in music school were not engineers. A lot of them were songwriters. A lot of them were music therapy people. A lot of them were music education. A lot of them were sound designers and programmers, film scores. And not only is it good to have a diverse group of friends, but two things. One is that if you run into a problem and you're only asking engineers how to solve that problem, chances are they're going to have the same thought processes as you. They're thinking at it from an engineer's standpoint. But if you say to an engineer and you're like, what's wrong with this song? It doesn't sound right. And they're like, well, you could cut out some 500, or it doesn't sound like your kick drum's punchy enough. But if you ask a songwriter, they're like, you know what? There's no high point. There's no high point in the vocal line. Everything feels blah. Or if you talk to an A&R guy, he might say, this is so 5 years ago. You're going to have to wait another 5 years until that's hip again. Or if you talk to a sound designer, they could say, I feel like this sound could be improved if you did this a certain way. They've got different answers to the same question. So you can approach things in different ways, and more angles is always better than one angle. The second thing that makes it good to have friends from a diverse group of group of interests is that in the future, when you get to be my age, these people are in music, like you, they love music, and they need product. And if they're your friends, then automatically, like, you're on the list. They may not call you for every gig, but they may call you for one or two. And it's always fun to work with your friends, number one, and two, like, everyone is always looking for a gig. Even the guys who are doing huge records are doing gigs with their friends because it's fun, and it fills in gaps. So keep your connections because it's good from a business standpoint and also good for your soul. So, my next point, ask lots of questions. Engineers like to talk about themselves. I do. I like to talk about myself. If you talk to a lot of old engineers, the thing that they cherish the most, more than credits or money or gold records, is the really funny, ridiculous stories that they come up with. And there's so many stories, so many really, really, really funny stories. In fact, my brain is, I'll tell you, if any of you want to hear one, I'll tell you one after we're done streaming. But occasionally, when they tell these stories, they'll also give you a little bit of insight into their workflow, what worked for them in a certain situation. The singer was being really difficult, or this person was having all these people in the studio and we didn't know what to do, or this guitar was acting up and we didn't know how to solve the problem. You hear all these stories from all these people who love to tell you. They don't just tell you the problem, but they also tell you the solution. And once you collect a bunch of those solutions, then you have those stories added to your toolbox. And if you should come across those problems, then you can fix them quick. And if you can fix them quick, like I said, time is money and you become a hero. So always listen to stories. Be a great assistant and assist your teachers. Most of your teachers here at Capitol are working engineers, working musicians. And they're paid to teach you. They're paid to tell you these stories, so take advantage of it. Along that line, oh my goodness, we're so close. Don't be overbearing and learn about the art of the hang, because you may want to ask someone a lot of questions, but if someone is in the studio all day, the last thing they want to talk about is the studio. You should be diverse in your interests so people want to talk to you about things other than audio, and then when their brain is reset, then you can talk to them about audio things. One last thing about that, and then I'll tell you a quick story, and then I'll let you guys go to your next thing. If all things are equal in a recording situation, like if you're in Nashville, and there's a bunch of people that can all do the same thing. They can all engineer, they can all program, they can all mix. The thing that helps me choose who I want to work with are that these people are my friends and I don't know these people. So always work on your people skills. Always work on your people skills. Last thing, I was just doing a music video. I was recording a live music video for this band called The Never Claim on Wednesday in Champaign, Illinois. And there's a producer that I work with a lot named Ian Eskelin. We were nominated for a Grammy this year in category 39 for something. But in any case, I asked him, I said, about being a people person, like what would you tell these students if you were going to do this talk? And he said, just gigging as much as possible and being a people person helped him get a broad amount of coverage as far as like people in the business. So this is his story. He was in a synth band at age 13. There were 4 guys that played synthesizer. They played school dances, not even the main stage, like the back room where all the kids hung out. But he and a buddy from that band went to Wheaton College. They started a band there which was, it was a horn group that played heavy metal songs like Enter Sandman, that kind of thing. That band broke up, and he took a guy from that band named Howie Benno. How many of you guys know Howie Benno? Any remixers in here? Well, anyway, they started a band, and they started playing around the area in Illinois, and they opened up for synth bands like Book of Love and CNC Music Factory, Information Society. I don't know if you kids are old enough to even know these bands, but trust me, they were so big back in the day. Howie Benno is a producer and remixer. He did stuff for Grace Jones, and he did stuff for the Chili Peppers and Katy Perry, 3 6 Mafia, Exhibit. So he automatically, just from a kid that he met from a band that he joined from another band, already has all these connections. You see how it's spreading out already. When him and Howie Benno were making a record at Wax Trax in Chicago, they happened to be in the same studio as Ministry. How many of you guys know Ministry? Okay, good, with Al Jorgensen. Howie Benno actually joined Ministry, and he was the keyboard player for Psalm 69, which was their biggest record. But that gave Ian connections to the guys at Wax Trax, to Brian Eno, who was working at Wax Trax at the time, Front 242, Paul Barker, who was in Revco. I don't know if I can say their real name on, but USSA. Connections to Bill Rieflin, who was in Ministry at the time. He was playing drums, who went on to play drums for 9 Inch Nails. Anyway, that fell apart, and he ended up playing out on his own. He got label interest. He got a record deal. He made a solo record by himself in Elgin, Illinois, where he was working on his stuff in one room, and in the other room was this little-known band called Sixpence None the Richer. He ended up getting to know those guys really well, and he's done a lot of work with them. So you see, like, just being out there and gigging and meeting bands and meeting people, your web is expanding. He got picked up as a keyboardist for a band called the Newsboys, who are a pretty big Christian band. And then from that, he got another solo deal, but he didn't do so well. And the label was about to fire him. But while he was kind of not happy with how his label was doing, he ended up writing a couple songs and playing them with really heavy guitars, and he gave it to his A&R guy. His A&R guy said, "This is great, but we can't say that it's you because they're about to fire you." So he calls it a brand new band called All Star United. They get picked up right when he gets fired from the same label. He gets fired and then picked up as another entity. They go on to sell millions of records and won a couple CCM awards and Grammy noms. So I just wanted to say that being out on the road, playing a lot, and also being a people person, being open to meeting new people, being a fun, good hang, is like, there's nothing like it as far as getting your name out there and spreading your web. So anyway, that's all I had. I don't know how much time I have, if any. Chad? 5 minutes? But I tell you what, if anyone has questions, I've got some crazy t-shirts with your name on it. Who's a 2XL? Does anyone have any questions at all? Any questions at all? Yeah?
What was your instrument in college?
Well, I was a vocalist, but I also played some guitar, piano. I played saxophone back in high school when Chad's dad was my band teacher, and I play trombone now, and I do some programming, so yeah. And that's a large, is that right?
Sure.
All right. I'm pretty good at judging people's sizes. Actually, I didn't even know what that was. These are all kind of... Anyone of a medium stature have a question? Yes?
Do you have any experience in television? And you said you had been out in LA.
Let's see. Some web shorts. Television-wise, the only television experience I have is... Well, actually, no, not really. I know Josh Radnor. You guys know Josh Radnor? We went to school together, and I had a song in one of his movies. So, but that's as close. Wait, is he? He's coming. Well, please tell him Marc Lacuesta said hey. Okay. Yeah. We went to the same school. I went to Kenyon College before I went to Berkeley. So, any other questions? Do you want a medium? Wait, let's see. What do we have here? I've got mediums, smalls, and 2XL. All right. Here you go. I've always wanted to do this, actually. The other one was to have one side of the room say taste great, and the other side say less filling. Yeah. Yes.
You mentioned that you're really strong and prominent in vocals. What's your current favorite album vocally?
My favorite current album vocally. Let me think about it. You know, I love listening to Florence and the Machine. I know she's a real blaster, but I love that she's like passionate, and I also love that her like dictum when she came into a studio to make records, like her main thing was make it sound expensive. She's like, I don't care how cheap the stuff is that you're using, we're gonna make it sound expensive. And you can hear that like in the way that she emotes. You can also hear it in the way that she processes the stuff that she programs. Like I really love Florence and the Machine. So medium, small.
Small.
All right. Here you go. Yep. Oh, sorry.
Have you done any like production on film scores or had any like experience with film scores?
I've only had songs that I've written placed in movies. I haven't done any film scoring, but I'm doing. I'm just kind of getting into that right now. I'm working on a couple webisodes for this company out in LA, and we'll see how it goes. It's a lot tougher than I thought it was going to be. Yeah, I thought, oh, you know, it'll be easy. I'll just put some music over this, but it's quite difficult. But I'm getting the hang of it. Medium?
Yeah, medium.
Ah, here you go. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
What made you come to music technology?
Well, when I was at Kenyon, I studied pre-medicine, and I was a biology major, chemistry minor, and I thought it's kind of a family business. Like my sisters are both doctors, my dad's a doctor, my mom's a nurse, and I thought when I got out of school, it's like I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. But I still did all the stuff. I still like took the MCAT and did all this. And after that year, I told my parents, I said, I don't want to go to medical school. And they're like, well, take a year to think about it. So I did, and after that year, I said, I want to go into music. And they're like, take another year to think about it. Actually, they were worried that I was going to be like the poor musician. And so when I was looking, I just knew I wanted to be involved in music somewhat. I knew that I liked to sing, I knew that I liked to play, I knew that I liked to write songs. And I knew that I loved Owner of a Lonely Heart. And I was trying to figure out why I loved that song so much, and I found out that it was Trevor Horn, the producer. He did some crazy stuff with that song. Listen to Owner of a Lonely Heart with headphones on and prepared to be wowed. So, and I mistakenly thought that producers and engineers were like the big money makers in the music industry. Now I know it's the music business people that make all the money and the song and the really successful songwriters. But at the time I thought, well, I can still be on the creative side and make some money, and I've accomplished that. So yeah, that's kind of how I got on the tech side of things. Yeah.
How do you deal with like people that you have come record with you that have like a different idea of where they want the record to go than you do, but you think your idea might be better?
At the end of the day, it's their record. If I feel really strongly about it, I might try to nudge them in a direction. If I feel super strong about it, I might beg, I might cry a little. But really, it's their record. And the best you can do is to get their idea down. The problem is, though, when you're a producer, you're the middleman between the artist and the label. And so if the label guy is telling you this needs to be more pop, and the artist is like, I need this to be more indie, you have to try to find a way to reconcile the two. And you also have to be a real creative speaker. You have to say, like, you can say to the artist, it's like, oh man, that vocal is so edgy, and then you can turn to the label and you can say, you know what, I had him turn the edginess down on that vocal, so I think it's good. And then when they both hear it, they're like, oh man, this is perfect. Yeah, so it takes a lot of diplomacy, and that's something that it kind of goes along with being a people person, but that's definitely something you should work on, is just being diplomatic. So that's the last one, but I'll still take any more questions if you got them. Yeah. Oh.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah.
What changes do you see coming in the next 10 years or so for the recording industry in general?
You know what? I think that finally they're going to get this streaming thing sorted out, and which would be terrific because, you know, like in the music industry, all the people that were doing records with budgets that were $80,000, $90,000 are doing budgets with $50,000. All the people who are doing $40,000, $50,000 budgets are doing like $10,000 to $15,000 budgets. Everyone who was doing the 10 to 15 is out of a job. You know what I mean? And so, and that's not to say that it's a good or bad thing. It's like a stock market correction. Like people who stick with it, stick with it. But I do think that you lose a lot of creative people who use music as their full-time job. They lose their creativity if they have to worry about another job. And I'm not saying that we should be paying people who are trying to be creative like inordinate amounts of money. I think that the people who are doing the creating should be paid enough to live on, so they can keep creating, because that's the whole point, isn't it? That's why we're all in this, to hear great music that makes our hearts swell. So I hope that they get the streaming thing figured out, and that a little bit more money starts flowing down to the artists, because some of the biggest artists that I know still have to have a second job. So anyway.
That's great. Everyone, help me thank Marc for the great keynote.